And we've seen that, but what do we do with our economy? How do we stabilize that? There've got to be alternatives. We've got to also be realistic at that in that sense, right? Let's also bring in Professor Swaran Singh. Sir, we're looking at India-China's relationship finally coming to a better place. Prime Minister Modi is going to be holding a 40-minute talk with Xi Jinping. It's not unusual. He's part of a multilateral summit, the SCO. He's going to be meeting with the host leader. He will have a bilateral meet there. It's not unusual for that to happen. But considering the circumstances where Trump has imposed 50% tariff, the situation has become complicated for India economically. How important and significant will this bilateral talk with China be?
I think for us in India, this is the most important conversation that is happening during Prime Minister's visit to China. Of course, he is also likely to have meetings with other leaders. I assume he is meeting the leader from Myanmar. Then, of course, most important other meeting is the trilateral between President Putin, President Xi Jinping, and Prime Minister. And of course, the renewed enthusiasm of India, which is witnessed in Prime Minister personally attending Shanghai Cooperation Organization, which becomes an interesting forum given President Trump's sort of blitzkrieg of tariffs against one and all. Second, you raised issue, and it is often raised, about trust and distrust between India and China relations. I cannot see any relationship where there is not an issue of trust and distrust. We are witnessing what is happening in India-United States relations right now. President Trump has just announced that he is not going to come to Quad Summit hosted by India this year. So he's constantly ratcheting it up. What we are saying is degrees of trust and distrust, that not an issue of trust and distrust. We are witnessing what is happening in India-United States relations right now. President Trump has just announced that he is not going to come to Quad Summit hosted by India this year. So he's constantly ratcheting it up. What we are saying is degrees of trust and distrust that is increasingly fluctuating. And in case of China and India, there is a clear turn after Kazan meeting of Prime Minister Modi and Xi Jinping as on the sidelines of BRICS summit, and now they are meeting on the sidelines of SCO summit. And that happened way before Trump even came into the picture. So it's a standalone, independent process where China and India, for many reasons, Trump could be one of the reasons, have decided that they need to really work on their irritations and start a new chapter of CBMs. The most recent, of course, was the special representatives talks, 24th round in Delhi between Wang Yi and Ajit Doval, where they agreed on 10-point consensus as to how they wish to take that relationship forward. And in that sense, I think it's a very significant meeting that the two leaders have agreed to dedicate 40 minutes, and they could go beyond 40 minutes, to spend time on talking about bilateral relations. Of course, their conversation, given their stature, will also be on regional and global issues. So some of that will be reflected in Shanghai Cooperation Organization final declaration also. But there are several specifics which are already on the table, and how to take them forward. That is where, when officials are constantly working and they are basically cutting the T's and dotting the I's, but strategic direction comes from national leaders. And their 40 minutes together, I think, holds significance for India-China relationship, and it will showcase in what direction, in what case, which initiatives will move forward faster. And they are already talking of the next stage of relationship. Their body language will tell us whether it is a reset or it is an incremental change. But some of the concrete issues, like setting demarcation working group, for instance, never in history this was spoken of. We were only talking about peace and tranquility on the border. Demarcation happened partly in terms of conversation during Vajpayee's time, and Jaswant Singh was leading that conversation at that time. But they are now talking among 10-point consensus to think of a demarcation experts group, river water sharing expert group, how to take that conversation forward. So some of that are issues. I think right now trade will be on their mind. So strategic materials, right, like rare earth materials, magnets, etc., are already being facilitated from China to India. Fertilizers have opened up from China to India. Similarly, India is opening up visas not only to the technical staff but also to managerial staff coming from China. So there are going to be several specifics. I think flights are going to be one issue. Before we moved into pandemic, remember there used to be 539 scheduled flights every month, and that involved 371 by Chinese carriers and 168 by Indian carriers. And nine major routes were working directly between India and China. Delhi was directly connected between Shanghai, Beijing, Guangzhou, and Kunming. Mumbai was connected to Shanghai, Guangzhou, and Chengdu. Kolkata was connected to Kunming. And that has been a huge problem because every time people have to travel to each other's country, they have to either go through Bangkok or Hong Kong or Singapore sometimes. And there is an enormous anticipation that the direct flights is something that could be revived again as they meet. But there could be also focus on border, which is where Telek also just mentioned. There's a process of de-escalation. Even on that, you hear the Chinese voices are today talking of quote unquote early harvest, which would include specifics. I think they're already talking of opening border trade, for example, at Shipkila, Lipu Lake, and Nathula. And in that sense, making border atmospherics relatively more normal. And India always says nothing is normal until borders are not normalized. So, in that sense, some of those issues which are creating irritations on the border or making it difficult to de-escalate on the border. See, after disengagement from forward areas, they have to now focus on how to move back some of the semi quasi permanent structures or heavy equipment taken forward, etc., and the whole set of new confidence building measures which need to be built in because China and India are no longer the same as they were in 1988 when the chapter of peace and tranquility started and a dozen conventions and arrangements, etc., were made as to how to maintain peace on the border. We are today talking of whole new set of arrangements that need to be made. So in that sense, I think when you look at the larger picture, that is where the meeting of national leaders becomes significant. And we are going to see some body
If I could
language, some
also,
language, some specifics.
my question on China and India. I was in fact just reading up on 113 billion we have in terms of trade deficit.